Greetings, this is my 2016 Chevy Volt. It's been a great car and I love it very much, but it has one flaw. It was made by General Motors. At around 70,000 miles, it developed two problems. The check engine light and the Stabilitrak service warning appeared on my dashboard. Additionally, the brakes started making noise and the pedals started to feel soft. When I put my OBD reader on it, it gave me the following error code, P25A2. When I asked my dealership service department what the code was, they told me it was a failing hub sensor on the front passenger side. So I got out my tools and my camera to show you how I fixed both the braking issue as well as the error code. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, sorry for the wind noise in advance. It is a bit windy out here, but it's a nice day, so I thought I'd work on the Volt. This is the piece that causes the check engine light and the Stabilitrak warning to happen. And the reason for that is that this is on the passenger side. So unfortunately we didn't film the removal of this, but what I'm going to do is do a brake job on the driver's side, and I'm going to talk you through what we did to take this out. But just to give you an idea of the problem, this right here, this wheel hub here, has this magnet. And you can see how crusty and corroded and rusted it is. And there's a sensor that you can see, a little black piece that you can see inside of the where the axle goes in, that rests against this magnet, and that's what I guess senses the Stabilitrak. And when this gets all corroded and rusted, that's when you get the check engine light or the Stabilitrak warning light, and where you have to replace this. So what I'm going to do, like I said, is we replaced this on the passenger side. After we replaced this also, we replaced the brakes. So I'm going to do a brake job on the driver's side and explain what I did in the process also to get this off. Okay, so obviously the first thing to do, I've got the rear wheel chalked, and I've got it jacked up. I've got jack stands under each of the wheels, so both wheels are actually off the ground, although it might not look like it. They're just barely off the ground. So the first thing to do is obviously to take the wheel off. And if you've never taken a wheel off before, you just get your breaker bar and just take your lug nuts out. I've got a little bit better tools than that, so I'm going to go ahead and use my air ratchet. This is a 19mm socket that does these. Almost everything in here is metric, which surprised me, even though it's a GM car. So I'm going to go ahead and take the wheel off with the 19mm ratchet. Alright, so once the wheel is off, what we're going to do is just take off our caliper, and this is all we have to do for the brake job, and then we'll talk more about the rest. Okay, so the caliper bolt's in here, and then there's a similar looking bolt over on the bottom here, which I can't really, I don't know if you can get that in camera, but it's just these two bolts. They're 14mm, so I've got a little 14mm socket. I'm just gonna go ahead and remove these. They shouldn't be that tight. Yeah, just a little persuasion, and then they should basically come out by hand. There you go. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this caliper, the caliper off. Do a little persuasion with my dead blow. There it goes. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed my wire up. I'm just going to hang this on the strut tower here. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a soft rubber line. See, there's a soft rubber line. You don't want the caliper just kind of hang off of that, because you could damage that rubber line here. So take a little bit of wire, coat hanger, and just get it up out of your way. And I like to just hang it on the strut tower, and that usually is good enough. All right, now it's resting on that hanger, we're good to go. If you're just doing a brake job, all you have to do is take the pads out. And the way you do that is there's these little wire clips here, and you don't really, I think these are just kind of anti-chatter. I don't know if you really need these. I don't think I put them back on the other side. But basically just squeeze it out, and these will come right off. You just kind of pinch them inward, and they'll come off. So then next, we'll take the pads out. Now the pads should be somewhat free now, so basically I just, wedge a screwdriver in there and try to get it started to come out. There we go. There they are. Alright, if just doing a brake job, we're pretty much done with the disassembly. The only other thing we might want to do is we're going to replace these little steel things here. So you can go ahead and pull those out. Because these will get replaced. Just kind of, some of these are more stubborn than others. There they go. So now we're completely torn down and ready to replace the brakes, at least the brake pads. But here's the thing: when you're replacing the hub or the brakes, if they're anything like mine in a GM car, and the rotors are probably bad too, and that's the reason why I'm replacing these brakes. So I will have to go further than this, and that would mean taking off the caliper. I don't know what the word for this is, but the caliper cage, I guess, is what I usually call it. There's 21 millimeter bolts back here, one here and one here. So just feel for them, but yeah, they're back in there. If you put your head back in here, you can kind of see the bolt goes through into the back of that caliper casing. So there's those two 21 millimeter bolts. You'll need a 21 millimeter, a good quality 21 millimeter open-ended wrench, and a 21 millimeter socket, because this one at the top is so close into this, the arm there, that you won't be able to be very difficult. You can't get a socket on there very well. It's actually getting blocked by this bolt here that holds on the arm. So I had to use, on the other side, an open-ended wrench on this side, and you might need a hammer or something to get it down, or a cheater bar, and then on the bottom one I can get the socket on. So I'm going to go ahead and get those off. Next, we're going to take off the rotor, and to do that, there's a little torque screw. This is a metric T30 Torx socket. See, it fits in there. And then I'm going to use just a regular socket wrench. And it should be on very tight. if you need to take a bar, you know, because this is going to be freely rotating, you can take a bar and hold it while you know, do it. But this should be fine. You should be able to get this all pretty easily. Okay, once you do that, the rotor should be free to come off. You might notice it's not coming off. If that's the case, just take, if you've got a little rubber dead blow hammer, it's probably the safest thing. Just get a few love taps here. That should break it free from the rust. There you go. Now the reason we have to replace these rotors is simply because AC Delco rotors are complete and total garbage. Look at the amount of pitting and rust. These are the worst as far as OEM rotors. I've never seen pitting and rust on rotors this bad. I've done it on a Chevy Traverse, various other GM cars, and again, 70,000 miles, they're terrible. I'm not recommending anything. You do your own research. I just went ahead and went with the CarQuest Platinum. These are from Advanced Auto. So they are aftermarket. They are painted, so they've already painted the center and the sides, which is nice for areas like ours where we are prone to a lot of rust. So these are the CarQuest from Advanced Auto that are made for this car, and that's what I'm going with. Let's talk about the hub, because unfortunately, like I said, I did not get shots of the hub of removing that. So I'm just gonna kind of have to talk you through it and point it out on this side of the car. So if you notice the hub, the way it's set in is by way of these 3 bolts in each of the triangle ends here. So if you look at there's the triangle right there, it's pretty rusted, but feel in the back here, and these are the bolts. There's one here, there's one, this is the tough one, up in the middle back here, and then there's one on the other side. Just feel around, and that you can actually see the bolts coming out, so you should know whether these are turning. You will need a pretty good quality 18 millimeter socket for those. Do you have so I would suggest an impact socket or something similar, or at least a high quality socket. So what I ended up doing is I had a 1/2 inch, I didn't end up needing an impact, just a high quality socket. So 1/2 inch extension and a short socket. I was able to get that in to this 18 millimeter that's right here. Now the one thing that I did have to undo, if you notice that socket comes out about right here. This sway bar, I think that's a sway bar link, was in my way. So what I ended up doing, let me move my light, was I took I think this is another 18 millimeter socket. So I've got a deep 18 millimeter socket. I put it on here and I took this nut off, and that you can push this back and just turn this to its side. So you just have to take this nut off that upper sway bar link and just kind of, you know, once you pull it through, just kind of set it aside. That'll give you room to get your socket in there, and you can break that 18 millimeter nut. And that's the tough one. That's the top one, the middle one. The other two are fairly easy. You can pretty much use any kind of socket, even without an extension, and just get them, like you can see right here, on each side. So just use a normal deep wall socket and extension. If you need a breaker bar, you could probably get under here and break it. So, but we were able to do that. We got those 3 bolts out, again, which are those 3. Now the other one is, you'll notice that it's a spline shaft. That is the end of your axle. Your axle is right here, and that is the end of the axle. So what you'll need is a 32 millimeter, which I happen to have right here, a 32 millimeter socket to go on there. And I end up using an impact driver. I don't know, I'm guessing this is probably torqued at 90 pounds, maybe 100 pounds. I think that's what I torqued it back down at. But you'll need to take that off, this big nut off, and that will free up the entire assembly. Your heat shield for your rotor heat shield will come off, and then the hub will slip just right out. Quick voiceover edit before I continue with my live explanation of putting the new hub on. This is a shot of the removed hub. Notice there's an orange tabbed washer. Make sure you buy and replace this part while you're doing this. It was just a $3 part, and yours will likely be as rusted as mine. The part number is 11611964. Just pull the old one off, clean up the axle end, and slip the new one on. Okay, back to you, Scotty. Then you'll simply take the new one and slip it on. Make sure before you start tightening this bolt in, you get it in and you get it, the shaft into the splines properly. And once you have it into the splines seated, you can then start feeding your 3 bolts around the outside, and then all loose, and then get your big castle nut on the end here. And then you can once you have everything kind of hand tightened in, you can then start tightening this in, and then finally tighten that in. As far as torque specs, I don't know. Ask them, or maybe consult the GM guide on that. But I went ahead and just torqued these down as hard as I could, probably 90, 80, 90, maybe even 100 pounds. This one, my torque wrench only goes up to 70. I don't have a high one. So I made sure it was at 70, and then I went a lot harder on it. So I'm guessing I did it probably around 90, 100 pounds. So I torqued these all down probably around 90, 100 pounds. And that's it. All right, well, anytime you buy brand new rotors, if this is your first time replacing any kind of brake rotors, what you need to know is that these are coated with an anti-rust protection coating, and so you will need to go ahead and take your brake cleaner, buy at least a can of this, spray off the inside. And that will take off that coating. And we'll spray off the outside, but after we install it. So we'll go ahead and put this on. And what we want to do is, before we bolt it on, we want to see where turn the axle here, we'll put our set screw up at the top, and that'll make it easy for us to determine that's where our set screw was. So that's where we need it to line up. We'll go ahead and put that back in our little torque set screw. This is too tight. This is really good. But it's not that. Also, never hold on. Okay, now we can go ahead and clean off the outside. Okay. Now, we need to go ahead and put our caliper cage back on. Okay, now that I have them seated, I'm going to go ahead and get my butt off my stool and torque them down. Again, I don't have the torque specs, nor can I fit a torque wrench under here, but I'm going to go with get them on as tight as I can do it. Alright, so torqued. Next, get our pads. So this is the pads, again, just Advance Auto. I just stick with them. I don't know what's good or not. I've tried different Duralast, AutoZone, whatever. These are the premium pads. They come with, this is 4. This is the CarQuest Premium Gold. You get all 4 of them, so you only have to buy 1 box of these for both sides. You just have to buy 2 different rotors. They do come with these new brackets that I'm going to go ahead and put in. So it's basically just push them on. They go like this. And you may want to just make sure they're seated. Just kind of make sure they're seated with a next, caliper grease. This is a tube of it. You can buy this at Advanced Auto or any auto store, or if you don't need a whole thing of this, because I've done tons of brake jobs, I'll just get a little packet of caliper grease at the desk. But what you're going to do here is put just a little bit inside this little area right here, and I just spread it on with my finger, just a thin coating, and you're going to do that on the tops and bottoms on both sides, because that's where the caliper pad is going to glide in and out of this little channel in here. So we'll go ahead and get that greased on both sides. That's good enough. Just a little thin coating. All right, next up is the pads. When you get new pads, you'll have 4 to the box, right? Because you'll have a whole set for the front. You'll notice that there's two of the pads in the box have this clip and the other one doesn't. So what you want is, for each side, you want one with the clip and one without. Now the question is, what is this and where does it go? This is like I think this they call a chatter clip or something like that, or it's a wear sensor. And because the inside pad typically wears the hardest, you want the wear sensor, the clip, to be on the inboard side. And then how you orient the pad should be, the curvature of the pad should match the curvature of the rotor. So now that we've got everything greased up, this is kind of tricky, but you're going to put the inboard pad in like this. I'll show you on the outboard side because it's a little bit easier to film, right? Where we put that caliper grease in this slot right here, that's the way we're going to, that's where we're going to put the little stub out here. It's going to go in there. And what's difficult about these is you have to actually get it kind of underneath here first, and you have to get it kind of on both sides at the same time and kind of get it into this clip. And it can often be a struggle. Not often, it's always a struggle. So I'm going to shut up now and just kind of probably have to speed this up, and you can watch me struggle and do it. Hopefully you're a little bit better at it than me. There. Whew, okay. One's in. And now I want the clip. Alright, well, I got the pads in. It was a nightmare. I forgot that. I've done plenty of brake jobs where I didn't replace the rotors and just the pads. I forgot that while having this caliper out, it's probably better to put these clips in and bend these tabs in, and then maybe even fit the pads in before you put it on the clip, before you put it in. That would probably be a lot easier. I just forget to do that sometimes because I don't always replace rotors. Okay, so now that we got the pads seated in there, both clipped in, greased up, now we can go ahead and take our actual caliper, and actually I'm going to set it up here. You'll notice that the caliper is out a little bit, and for those of you who maybe don't understand how these work, it's this, obviously this piston pushes out onto the pad, and it basically squeezes the pads onto the rotor, and that's how it stops your car. Well, the problem is the piston's out, and the reason it stays out is because as the pads wear down, the pads wear down, and this ends up kind of staying outward. And so the way you reset the calipers, every time you have to do a brake job on disc brakes, you have to do that. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove the cap off of our brake reservoir in the engine bay. Then you'll get yourself a big C-clamp. This is a 6-inch C-clamp right here. And then what I'm going to do is take one of the old pads and put it back upside down into the cylinder here. And I'm going to use the C-clamp to push this back in and reset it back down. So watch how I do that. Okay, as you can see, I've got the C-clamp just around the piston here. I put the old pad in just to protect the piston as I'm pushing it in with the clamp, and I'm basically just going to screw that back down, and it's going to push that piston back into its default position all the way back in. And once you've seated it out, take the clamp off, and now your piston is reseated. Go ahead and put it back onto your brake pads here. Now I got 14mm bolts. I'll go ahead and line this back up. Put one in the top here, and one in the bottom. And you know, I'm not going to show the rest, but that's pretty much it. I'll just tighten these bolts back down and put the wheel back on, and we're all done. I'll go ahead and test them out. Now, one thing to note is, if your pads are fairly old, what you may end up doing is when you reset both calipers, you might end up pushing more fluid back up into here. You'll notice that I'm above the max line now. In fact, it's almost probably topped off at the very top there. What I normally do is I'll get a little dip thing and just pull some of the fluid out until we're just back to the max line here, because what ends up happening is as you get oil changes or dealer maintenance, they'll top off your brake fluid as those pads wear down and as the calipers squeeze in and they require more hydraulics. They'll add more fluid in. Well, once you reset the calipers, you'll push that fluid back into the reservoir, and you might end up overfilling the reservoir. So I'm just going to take a little bit out here. Well, that completes the fix. To review, I have both front rotors and pads replaced, as well as the passenger side hub and tabbed washer. The only remaining step I did was test drive the car to break in the new pads and see if the Stabilitrak warning resolved itself. If you notice the warning light or code persisting, try removing the fuse for the ABS brake module in the engine bay to reset the module. I believe it is F27. And if this video is helpful for you in any way, consider leaving a super thanks by clicking the thanks button right under the video and leaving $3 or $5. Or you can subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching.